Well, hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of the MongoDB Podcast live stream. So we're kind of mashing it up here with podcast and a live stream. Got folks coming into the YouTube. Welcome, folks. As you come in, maybe think about sharing where you're from. I'd love to know where y'all are joining from. We've got a special guest in the studio today.
I don't know about special, but sure.
You're special, On. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I'd like to welcome On, and I'm going to ask you for help on pronouncing your last name. Is it Freund?
It's Freund. It's like the
Freund.
psychoanalyst with an extra N before the D.
Okay, Freund. How'd I do?
Great.
Okay, awesome. Well, On Freund, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on the live stream. How are you today?
I'm feeling great. How about you?
Oh, I'm great as well. Yeah, it's a good day. It's a good day. A little chilly here, just outside of Philadelphia. Where in the world are you located?
I'm in Tel Aviv.
Okay.
It's a tough week for me to speak to someone from Philly because Philly destroyed the Giants on Sunday, and I'm a Giants fan.
We're talking about football.
We can talk about anything: sports, software, video games, you name it, music.
I love it.
Anyway, so I'm in Tel Aviv. It's very sunny. This week has been like summer.
Oh, great! I love that. I have to come. I've never been.
All right, you should definitely do it. We had like a big Mongo delegation come into Israel this week.
Really?
Yeah, I was at a fireside chat with the MongoDB CEO last night, which was really inspiring.
Yeah.
Next time you should come over too.
Absolutely, I'll have to join Dave next time he comes to Tel Aviv. Well, fantastic. So as you're coming into the stream, folks, let us know where you're from, where you're at in the world. We'll see how far people are joining us in the stream from. And today we're going to talk about scaling a company, scaling knowledge across your company through implementation of simulation software. Your company is Wilco. Tell the folks a little bit about Wilco.
Yeah, Wilco. Wilco is kind of like a flight simulator, but for software developers or for software generally instead of aviation. So if you look at one of the biggest problems in the software industry is that developers don't have a good way to practice. You practice on the job, and we all know what happens when people practice on the job. Disasters. People make catastrophical mistakes.
Yeah.
Understandably. But there are also other problems. So it's very slow. You can only practice what you're encountering, which kind of dictates the pace. And you're only going to set up a build system once for a project, right? Or maybe after a few years you're going to do it again. But that's just one example. And if something goes wrong in production, it's probably going to go to the person who's dealt with production issues for quite a while now, and they know what to do. Yeah. If there's a component to a legacy component that you need to rewrite from scratch, it's going to go to the person who's done that, been there, done that. And that also kind of leads to the third problem with practicing on the job, which is it doesn't provide equal opportunity. So much depends on the team you get to, the mentors you have, even your ability to get a job, a good job, right?
Yeah.
So all of these disadvantages are things that we wanted to solve. And we started looking at other domains, and we said, all right, what's the closest? Where are people having to deal with live situations where there's a lot at stake and they can only practice it when it actually happens? And we said, all right, pilots, they encounter this. What do? They have a simulator, and a regular flight is, relatively speaking, it's boring. Nothing out of the ordinary usually happens. But then, every now and then you need to land on the Hudson, and the only way that you're going to get prepared for that is through the simulator.
Yeah.
So we started thinking about how to translate the world of flight simulators into the world of software, and that's kind of how Wilco was born.
Oh, wow. I love the analogy, and it's so powerful. I mean, Yeah. So what better way? It's super important that pilots get things right, but isn't it also so important that software developers, DevOps,
Yeah.
operations personnel, isn't it also mission critical that they get things right? So what better way?
Exactly. And all these planes have software in them now, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
pilots getting things wrong is disastrous, but also the software getting things wrong could be disastrous.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, where was this idea born? When did you start thinking about the mission of Wilco?
Well, you could say that there were a few steps along the way. So initially, I started my first ever job as a software engineer and realized that nothing that I've learned actually prepared me for it.
Mm.
You come in first day on the job
Mhm.
and you've learned how to write code. You think to yourself, all right, where's this function that I'm supposed to write? Because that's all you did in college,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
And then you realize, oh, wait, there's actually a very huge code base.
Mhm.
And I have teammates and I have to work with them. And
Yeah.
there is a production system that I have to maintain. And no one has actually taught me any of these things.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the first time I encountered this thought. And then it really hit home. It was 2013, I think. Yes, 2013. I joined Handy as VP of engineering,
Mhm.
and I was constantly just looking for ways to upskill my teams, or my team, because a lot of them were great coders who have never had to deal with a production system before,
Yeah.
for example,
Mhm.
or have worked solo. So I said, all right, how do I do that? And I reached out to a few of the boot camps and I said, what if we do some sort of evening school where we expose them to simulations of real world events, and that
Mhm.
way within months they can gain the experience of years.
Yeah.
And all the boot camps said, it's a great idea, but we do 0 to 1. We don't really care about 1 to 100. So you're on your own on
Wait.
this.
So explain that to me. What you do 0 to 1.
So boot camps are all about, I want to take someone who has never done
Okay.
anything software related and turn
Mhm.
them or give them the knowledge needed to become a software developer. But
Mm.
once they've become that, they're on their own.
Mhm.
Whereas Wilco is all about, you got to one. You're a software developer. You have
Mhm.
some sort of training or basic knowledge or anything that has prepared you specifically in most cases for the specific skill of writing code.
Mhm.
And we want to turn you into a whole developer with all the soft and hard skills that you need in addition to just being able to write code. So
Outstanding.
that's why the boot camps didn't really find it a good fit for them.
Mm.
And then I from Handy I moved over to WeWork, did a few roles there, came back to Israel. I was living in New York before that. Came back to Israel, offered it to an Israeli boot camp. Kind of heard the same response too. And then in 2020, when I left WeWork, I said, "All right, this is it. It's time to start that school that I've been talking about for years." And I reached out to a former colleague of mine from WeWork, a good friend, and I said, "Hey, listen, I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to open this school." And he told me that I'm stupid. So- and I asked him why, and he said, "Well, you're going to get 6, maybe 10 students per class. You're not making a dent in the universe. Let's figure out a scalable way to solve this."
Mm.
And by the way, another former colleague of ours and another good friend is thinking about the same space. So
Mhm.
let's get the three of us together and figure it out. And we all got together and said, all right, how do we do this? Bless you.
Thank you.
How do we do this? And each one of us came with their own kind of angle, but we didn't really set out to start a company because I was actually just about to start being a VC. And I was always
Mm.
thinking about this school as a side project that I'm going to run.
Mhm.
And one of my co-founders was at Facebook at the time, et cetera. So, we just said, this is cool. We're really passionate about this. Let's chat about it, figure out how to solve this and
Mhm.
see if we actually do. And we started chatting, and then we realized that L&D, or learning and development of developers, is broken in many ways. And one of the biggest ways in which it's broken is everything is A, so focused on code once again, but B, boring. So
how so? How so? Explain.
So people don't like listening to a professor talk over video. And the fact that it's over video doesn't change the fact that it's just like, sitting in a college classroom. So it's very dry and it's very theoretical. And in many cases, it's also very top down. It's like, HR is saying you should be using this tool and watching all the videos that we want you to watch. And maybe it's actually the same system that does your mandatory training for things like anti-bribery or any sort of compliance and regulation that your company has to go through, right?
Yeah.
I remember at WeWork, by the way, we had this system where we had to go through all these HR trainings. And at some point, we developers realized that if you open Chrome developer tools, you can speed up the video and play it at 2x the speed. And whenever it was like
we don't want the L&D team to know that we're doing that.
Whenever it was the mandatory training season, everyone knew that they should talk to the developers to figure out what's the current hack on how to make things run fast. So we said, all right, we need to make this super cool. And then, we came with this flight simulator analogy. And then we also came up with the idea that it needs to be fun and immersive in a way like a flight simulator. And that's how Wilco was born. And that's also how Wilco, the name, was born. Because, many people are too young to know, but back in the 80s, there was a series of video games called Space Quest. And the protagonist of those games was named Roger Wilco, which is pilot speak for Roger, I got your command, and Wilco will comply. I'm going to execute the command.
I had no idea. That that's what Wilco. I've heard the term Roger Wilco, but I never knew.
Yeah. So the name of the character was basically a pun, because Space Quest was all about being in space in a spacecraft, not like flying a plane, but a spaceship. And Roger Wilco is actually a space janitor, who's kind of like the anti-hero that accidentally saves the galaxy. So we liked 80s video games. It made a lot of sense because it was connected to flying and pilots, and that's how the name Wilco was born.
Oh, what a great story. Fantastic. Okay, so you kind of dusted over a bit of your history, and I'm interested in your time at WeWork. Like, what an amazing ride that must have been. Can you talk a little bit about, so what was your role, and when did you come on in the journey of WeWork, and what was that like? Share that.
Sure. So I joined WeWork in 2014. We were a bit over 100 people. I think I was employee number 114. And we had like a dozen buildings, and no one knew that. I mean, Adam knew, but no one outside of WeWork knew this is going to explode in the way that it did. And definitely no one knew that it's going to implode afterwards in the way that it did. So we had a dozen buildings, and we had a very small engineering team, and I joined in to manage that and build it out. And I had to, kind of talk 5 to 8 times a day on why WeWork even needs an engineering team. And people are still surprised by it, even though for some reason they take it for granted when you talk about the retail side of Amazon, for example, or Uber, or companies like that. And it's not very different.
Yeah.
But people are always thinking why WeWork needs an engineering team. And the truth is, we were doing some crazy tech there, and it was really great. And we were 9 engineers when I joined. I took that team to about 70 before moving back to Israel. And once again, always looking for ways to upskill my team. I moved back to Israel in the summer of 2016, and then started switching a couple more roles at WeWork. So initially moving from engineering to product, and then at the end, running WeWork Labs, which was our offering for startups.
Mm-hmm.
And WeWork was a crazy rise and fall story. I mean, a lot of what you hear in the press is true. A lot of what you hear is made up. If you've watched the show, We Crashed, I think it's a great show, but it is fiction. It's important to remember that. Anything from condensed timelines or consolidated characters to just flat out fiction. So just keep that in mind as you're watching. I do recommend watching it because I enjoyed it. I think it was great. It was well done. The acting was good. The plot was interesting, despite me going through it. But I do remember there was a point in the show where someone from like the WeWork alumni group on WhatsApp said something like "no spoilers," and I'm like, dude, you've written through the whole thing. Like, what are they going to spoil to you? You've seen it all. But it was fun. I got to work with amazing people. It's a great team. My 2 co-founders are from WeWork, and we have a couple more people on the team from WeWork. It's a shame that it ended up the way it did. I think that if we could, there are so many small things that if we could have done better would have changed the outcome. I think it was a collection of a lot of different small things that ended up, kind of ruining it for us. But just, a bit tighter governance on the corporate side, or maybe being a bit less ambitious with anything that wasn't totally inside of the company's main mission. Having a better S2 filing. So many small things that if one of them was right, I think it would have completely changed their trajectory.
Yeah. So you mentioned We Crash. That's a drama series, intentionally somewhat fictional. There's a documentary that tells the story as well. What are your thoughts on the documentary?
I didn't enjoy this one so much. To be honest, I just it didn't capture me. I don't know what to say. I didn't find myself like hooked to the seat in the same way that I was with We Crashed. Even though it was just as much fiction, probably.
Did you find yourself in a character in We Crashed?
I did not find myself in a character in We Crashed, and I'm happy. Happy that I didn't. I can say that in the documentary, I'm like, in so many of the scenes, I'm the person standing right outside the frame. Like the first person outside the frame is me, which is perfect. That's
you're okay
that's
with
exactly what you want to go for in a documentary like that.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Well, I appreciate you sharing a bit of that story. It is fascinating to have participated in that kind of roller coaster, and I'm sure that you take with you a ton of super valuable experience, and that's what we're talking about today: experience and how you can help folks take the experience that they have and craft what are called quests, right, in the product. Is that so? Explain how a quest is crafted, and I think, like, if you're listening in and you're wondering, what the primary focal point of, or the mission of Wilco is, as I get it, and you can help me if I'm off here, but tribal knowledge is a thing. Like developers come on board and they learn the system inside and out. I'm guilty of this. Like, I worked at Merrill Lynch for over a decade, and I learned certain systems inside and out, and I had that knowledge. The worst thing in the world you could do is leave the company with that knowledge and not transfer that. So it's the anti-tribal knowledge tool, as I see it. Right? Am I right?
Great way to phrase it. Yeah. Never try that pitch, but it's definitely a cool one. So overall, I think that practice for us as software developers is just so important. Whether it's generic practice, I just want to do more of that or pick up that new skill, or whether it's very specific practice. I want to know, or I want to train on things that happened to this team before. And you don't really have a good way to do that. And the stakes, like we said, the stakes are high if you do it for real. And you also have to wait for something to happen. So what if you could capture Like a lot of teams, what they do is after something happened, they do a post-mortem, right? They create this document, and it has a very important function of filling up the archive with content. That's all it does. Even though people spend a lot of time crafting it, it ends up getting into the archive and no one cares about it. But then what if you could actually capture that experience? And it doesn't matter if it was something good or bad, just something that happened that was meaningful for the team. Capture that in a quest. And that way, because it's also fun, everyone on the team would want to experience it. So instead of having to read this dry document, I can play the scenario out, and I can actually play it multiple times and try out different things and see, maybe we could have done better. Maybe we could have done worse. Let's try things out and see what happens. And if you do that often enough, and I like to call this a quest mortem. So instead of a post-mortem, you create a quest mortem.
That's great. I love it.
And if you do that often enough, then the tribal knowledge that you referred to is now captured in the form of quests. And any person, whether they're new to the team or within the team, can just play it and say, like kind of Neo, I know Kung Fu, right? So I know what happened to the team. I know why things happen. And all of a sudden, when I'm looking at a code review, I understand why people are doing certain things in a certain way. Because I remember, oh, wait, there was this one instance where that happened, and that's informing their decision-making as they're doing this today, right? Because that's what tribal knowledge is all about.
Yeah.
So if you have this corpus of quests around how your team operates and the experiences that it went through, then all of a sudden there's no tribal knowledge. There's shared knowledge.
Yeah. Powerful. That is so powerful. So I'm thinking about the lifespan of a relationship with Wilco. Obviously, we're going to want to get some quests built early on. These are going to be the successful steps in the journey of using Wilco successfully. Is there a services portion of your business?
Yeah. So you like if you by services you mean something like professional services, then yes, we can help you build quests, and more importantly, I think we can help you make quests better because we have this knowledge, and in the same way that we were talking about knowledge and skills, one of the skills that we at Wilco have honed is our ability to create good quests with catching narratives and good interactions and etc. But you're more than welcome to try out creating quests on your own. But then as a team, you also want to practice generic things. I don't think you should care just about the collective experience. You should also care about, hey, how do I play this quest that's going to teach me the ins and outs of the security implications of things that I'm doing? Or how about this quest about observability and performance? And that's why we also have a large list of partners with us that have created quests on the platforms. So, you want to practice observability. We have 4 quests created by New Relic. Pretty soon, we're going to have quests created by Circle CI if you care about your CI/CD pipeline, and Docker and a few other, and hopefully MongoDB someday. And all these partners, by playing their quests, that you're practicing observability using content that was built by the best experts on observability that are available, right? So I think that practicing generic skills is just as important as practicing your team specific ones.
Yeah. So if I understand, there are generally available quests, and then you can create your own.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, terrific. Okay. So we definitely want to get some MongoDB quests into that library. Speaking of MongoDB, we partner. You're leveraging MongoDB for a portion of your stack. You want to talk about how you're leveraging MongoDB today?
Sure. So we're using MongoDB and we're using Atlas, and it's the database that powers Wilco, the main database that powers Wilco. But I think even more interesting is it's also a database you can play around with on your quests. So this isn't, everything we do at Wilco is kind of dog fooding. And the stacks that we use, we also externalize as quests. So other people can practice those stacks as well, and we can practice those stacks as well, right? So if you're signing up, you can choose MongoDB as your database to practice on. And then that becomes, when we're talking about that performance quest that we've discussed, then in many of the cases, performance problems actually boil down to data and queries and how to optimize them, right? I'm sure that when you're investigating a performance problem, definitely a double-digit % of the cases, it ends up being a query that needs to be optimized, an index that needs to be added, something like that, right? So that actually allows you to practice really cool and advanced scenarios with MongoDB. And one of the things we'd want to do is also, highlighting cluster best practices and things like that in the future. So really giving you the knowledge of not just how to use MongoDB as a developer, but also how to use it when you're doing DevOps, and how to maintain a system that MongoDB is its data layer.
Yeah. And so I think there's going to be folks listening that are software developers. They're probably going to be curious about it. I want you to check the links below. There's a link there. You can click to head on over to trywilco.com, and you can sign up for free. What's the revenue model? What is the pricing?
So as an individual, you can sign up for free. As a team, if you want to get access to some of the team features, whether it's the ability to create your own internal quests. And by the way, anyone can create a quest for the general public. If you want to create something out in the open, go ahead, do it. That's awesome. But if you want an internal quest just for your own use, then that's part of our team's offering. And if you want to use Wilco as a team, then we sell licenses based on the number of developers, and we're happy to have that conversation with relevant teams. And of course, that also means that you get to have better understanding of how the team is leveraging the product, the skills that are being worked on. And if you're a VP of engineering, that all can also help you build out the team, because you'll be able to see, all right, my team is performing well on databases, but actually on the front end side, it seems like we don't have a lot of people with advanced skills. We need to maybe hire some more people and have them help the others. And maybe you're isolating two people and you're saying, this person's really good with security. This person's really good on front end, but I want them to work together and start pairing so they can kind of rub off each other and help each other progress where they're stuck. So I think that as a manager, this is also a great tool for you to help all of your team grow professionally in a more effective way.
So I'm thinking about, like, the next questions that I'll have will be around what's next for Wilco, what's coming down the pike in terms of the tech stack. But before we go there, I'm curious if you're thinking about, like, the analytics space and the correlation between companies that do this well and companies that leverage Wilco. I'd love to see that kind of Venn overlay, like companies that use Wilco experience less outages or something like that. Are you doing any kind of analytics?
I wish I could show that at the moment. I can't. In the future, hopefully I will be able. But I think some of the things that are clear is that teams that don't invest in professional growth on average would not be as successful as others. Obviously, there are always exemptions and outliers. But on average, I think teams who do not invest in professional growth would not be as good and would also probably churn more. And we see that developers constantly, in every survey done, they always say opportunities for professional growth is the number one motivator. And when you ask them why they left a job, then lack of opportunity for professional growth in many cases is the number one reason. And we all know that. I've worked with thousands of developers in my life. I think that everyone except for one person has just had this intrinsic motivation of becoming better. And developers they really want to become good at what they do. And if you give them a good avenue to do that, then I think they'll be very happy and very satisfied.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great space, and to think that you're having an impact on companies in that way is wonderful. I'm curious about the technology. How does a Quest simulate production? There's kind of two ways that I see this happening. You can actually drive clicks, like web interactions, but at some point you're doing it in a real sense. So where does that line exist between actually driving the screen and taking action against, let's say we're doing a quest on MongoDB Atlas, we're deploying a cluster. Now that's harmless. It's not going to affect production. Do we create a separate infrastructure and run these quests in real time against that? Or is it actually just fiction? Is it just screenplay?
So the cool thing is, even though you're supposedly working on a production system, you're actually working on your own copy of a production system.
Okay.
So, if you're setting up a cluster, it's your cluster. Now, the other characters in the quest will be interacting with that cluster as well. But another player who's practicing simultaneously is going to get their own cluster. So, you don't have to step on each other's toes. So in a way, if I'm playing on Wilco and you're playing on Wilco, we don't necessarily have to be colleagues within the fantasy company. We kind of get our own instance of it, unless we deliberately decide that we want to play together.
Okay. Now it makes sense. But it also, having that knowledge in mind now complicates the picture if I'm creating quests, because you're actually, so I would imagine you're spinning up some Docker instances or something along this line. Is that the case?
Yeah. Docker instances, if you're even for your own development environment. So we'll let you use code spaces, which is really cool. So you can go on code spaces and it will take your VS Code settings. So it acts and feels like your local IDE. But then that helps us spin up all the Dockers needed to run your own dev environment, right? And that's also something that's isolated. And by the way, even the code base. So you get your own GitHub repository that is the company repository, but actually it's yours to play, right? And even though other characters might be doing pull requests and reviews and issues, the humans are out of it unless you invite them to it. And that way we let everyone practice their own isolated environment.
Yeah. How close do you get to production? I'll tell you a little story real quick. One of the biggest problems I've experienced in my career was a time at a large scale financial company. And we were in the process of testing a rollout of, I had written a monitoring system that installed a little daemon on every production system. And we were rolling out an update to that. We're testing a rollout, and we changed the population of machines to all. And we roll out. Yeah. And we brought down production.
Amazing.
So confusing.
I want to turn this into a quest right away.
Right. Confusing production with your test environment is probably up there in the percentage of times that production has been impacted. How do you prevent that from happening with Wilco?
So, first of all, to be honest, we don't have a confusing your test environment with production quest just yet, but you've definitely inspired me, and I think it's an awesome idea, and I want to do it right away. Like I want to just get off this podcast and start writing it.
Right.
But in many ways, your interaction with production is, and definitely in a large organization, is not direct. So you get a dump. An anonymized dump of data from production that you need to analyze, for example.
Yeah.
So that's easy to simulate, right? Or maybe you have something that requires getting into observability, and you go into New Relic and see what happened. We actually know how to simulate the production-like loads in New Relic. So it looks, when you're looking into New Relic, it looks like you're analyzing a real production system, even though no real user has actually gone to your specific instance of the production system.
Yeah.
So part of the technical challenges that we're solving are exactly that. Like, how do you make an environment that actually no user is ever hitting look as if it's a real production environment, act as if it's a real production environment,
That's
produce
key.
data like a real production environment, integrate with services like a real production environment.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I mean, the possibilities are really limitless. But I'm imagining it can be complicated to set these quests up. What's the average time to roll out a set of quests for a custom company environment?
Well, it really depends on the complexity of what you're trying to achieve. But what I can say is that, if we're looking, for example, at quests that don't require new integrations that, are based on the integrations we already have, MongoDB being one of them, by the way. So if you do that, we did a hackathon about a month ago. We brought in 7 teams to the Wilco office. And in one afternoon, we had 7 quests. Now, being completely honest, some of them did require some more work on our side to tie up the narrative and feel like they're ready for production on the Wilco catalog. But one of them is already up. It's a quest called Bashing It, and it's about bash scripting. And
I love it.
And it's, to be honest, it's one of our best quests. And it was built by the community. So I think if you know what you're trying to do, and if you know the skill that you want people to work on, or the scenario that we're trying to mimic, and it doesn't require crazy integrations, you can do it really quickly within a couple of days. If it requires more integrations, talk to us and we'll figure out how to support you on that.
I love that. Yeah. Terrific. I do want to ask you, what's next? What's coming down the pike? What's exciting in the future at Wilco?
A lot of things are exciting. So just last week, we announced our quest builder. We've discussed creating quests, and just last week, we opened this up to the entire community. And in January, we're going to have another iteration of the hackathon. So the previous hackathon was kind of a beta run. The builder wasn't announced yet, and it was just for teams physically coming into our office so we can also observe how they work with it. But then in January, we're going to have a free open for all kind of hackathon, and there are even prizes. So if you look at our website, you'll actually find an invite to that hackathon. And we encourage you to actually start using Wilco, get on our Discord server, and try to find good teammates for that hackathon.
Team up.
So you can be prepared and build something cool.
Very cool. So if you're listening, you want to check out trywilco.com. The links are going to be in the show notes of the podcast. And if you're watching this live, check the description down below. Be sure to like and follow. This has been a great discussion. I want to thank you for swinging by. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap up?
First of all, thank you. This was great, and I really appreciate it. And all the thought that you put into the questions, and I really enjoy the conversation. And great voice, by the way. You were born to podcast.
It's all the mic.
I need to get the model afterwards. But yeah, the only thing I have to say is, for us as software developers, it's going to be really important to become better at what we do. And if you look at the storm that ChatGPT has caused in the past 2 weeks. Wow. Yeah. A lot of people are concerned, am I even going to have a job, or is AI going to write all of my code for me? And what I think is going to happen is that AI is going to take care of all of the boilerplate, which means it's not taking your job, but it is making it harder, because you're going to have to focus on real challenges. And you're going to have real experience and do things and know things to be able to keep up. So now more than ever, invest in your professional growth. If you don't want to do it through Wilco, that's fine, but definitely invest in your professional growth. And if you're doing this through Wilco, then awesome. We appreciate it, and we'd love your feedback, and we'd love for you to share it with your team.
Terrific. Well, once again, thank you so much for spending time with me and for entertaining my questions. Once again, folks listening, check the show notes. Visit trywilco.com. And terrific. Thanks, On. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.